Good evening. I hope all of you are doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Moed Kattan Daf Chav Zayin and starting at the 2 dots, 4 lines, 5 lines from the bottom on Chav Vav Amud Beis. In light of my complex, what turned out to not be so complex, but what I thought was going to be a very busy travel week. I still have a travel week, but I didn't actually properly plan for a siyum. So here's the game plan. What we're going to do is today we'll learn Daf Chav Zayin. Tomorrow we'll finish the Masechta without a siyum. On Thursday, what's tomorrow? Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep track.
Yeah. On Wednesday, tomorrow, we'll finish the Masechta without a siyum. On Thursday, I will be in Cincinnati. Yes, I'll be in Cincinnati, and I will record and post Daf Beis of Chagiga. On Shabbos, we'll learn Daf Gimel of Chagiga. On Sunday, we'll learn Daf Dalet of Chagiga and have a siyum on Maseches Moed Kattan. Monday. Is that what I said? Whatever. The siyum's on Monday. Whatever. It seems on Monday, but we're only learning one blot a day for the next many days. And tomorrow we're just going to push a little bit. It's a little bit longer. It's a long blot tomorrow. And then we're just pushed to the end of the Masechta. And then Shabbos one blot, Sunday one blot, Monday one blot, and then a siyum Monday night, which will be in memory of your father.
Keeps us on the,
We're perfectly on track. Yeah, absolutely on track. Okay. All right, here we go. And then that's our last Masechta in Seder Moed. If anybody wants to come to Poland and have a siyum in Shivas Chachmei Lublin, please let me know. 5 lines from the bottom. Vein mavrin al mitos zekufos. We had said in our Mishnah that one is not allowed to have the sudas havra, the suda of avelim, when the mitos are zekufos, when the beds are upright. They have to be flipped over, right? So it has to be that if the beds are flipped over. We're going to get into some of these details now. Tanu Rabbanan. Haholech lebeisa avel. If a person goes to the house of an avel, im hayalibo gaspo, if there was a closeness between the avel and the menachem, yavrehu al mitos kefuyos, then everyone should sit on overturned mattresses, because libo gaspo, I feel very close to the person who has come to be menachem avel. V'im lav, and if the person's not close, then yavreu al mitos ekuvos, and that person will sit on a regular bed, a bed that's not overturned. Really a funny story, actually. Rava Isra Bei Milsa. Rava unfortunately was sitting Shiva, and someone came over who felt closer to Rava than Rava felt to him. All legabe Abba Bar Marta, do Abba Bar Minyumi, the same name. And Rava Zakif, Rava sat on a regular one, indicating that he wasn't so close, because that's what we just said. And Abba Bar Marta Kafi, and Abba Bar Marti turned over the mattress. And Amar, Rava's like, don't think he's getting the social cues here. I sat on a mattress that was regular, which means I'm not libo gaspa, which means why are you sitting on this kind of mattress that's overturned? You didn't read the room right. So Amar, Rava's like, Kama lespe daita lahaitzurba me'rabbanan. This one's not really paying attention. He kind of missed all the cues. I guess he feels closer to me than I do to him. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us in a brayso. If a person's traveling, when they learn that Nebuch they have become an avel, so they can't get home. It's not like modern travel. They could be weeks and weeks away from home. If he's able to minimize his business doings, so then you might be imlav. It's if it's not possible for him to stop, then yagalgel imahen. What does it mean, yagalgel imahen? So take a look at Rashi on the top line. It's not really Rashi, but whoever it is. He can work in a group instead of working alone. It's not appropriate to work alone, but the Chazal gave a kula for him to work on this as part of a group. Says the Gemara.
Per hour, and you know that you can't afford to miss work, then it's okay not to sit.
That's a good we learned already. If you have zero money, then that was a conversation we learned. I don't remember the din because there were a lot of iterations, but that was discussed already. If you're poor, in lo ma'yochal was what the Gemara spoke about earlier in the Masechta. So here, Tana Rabbanan, we know, of course, that the din is to turn over the mita. So the Gemara says, me'ima saikofenes hamitos. When is one supposed to turn over the mattresses? So says the Gemara, this is a machlokas in the Tanoim. Mishiyatza mi Pesach Beso Divi Rabbi Eliezer. From the time the mace leaves the house, at that point, all the beds need to be turned over. Rabbi Yeshua over and Omer, no, that's not the time when this minhag starts. And the Rishonim actually point out it's not only that minhag that we're talking about all minhagi avelus. When do they all kick in? Mishiyistam hagolel, from the time that the kever is actually covered. This is a discussion in the poskim as to what this actually means. In America, it's different than in Eretz Yisrael. In America, a person is put in a coffin. They're put inside an iron cast massive container, and then there's a very heavy iron cast cover. So that's Yistam hagolel. It's when it's covered. In Eretz Yisrael, it's when the mace is actually covered with dirt. So that's Rabbi Yoshua Mishiyistam hagolel. Maisa, there was a story. Shemeis Rabban Gamliel Hazaken. Rabban Gamliel passed away. Kevan sheyatzim pesach beso. when the mace left the house, Amar lehem Rabbi Eliezer, L'shitaso said that the threshold of when we begin minhagi avelus is when you leave the house. And then he said to everyone there, Kafu mitosechem, it's time for you all to flip over your beds. Became a Nistam Agola, left the cemetery. Rabbi Yehoshua was there, and Amar lahem Rabbi Yehoshua. Oh, well, there was Nistam Agola. Kafu mitosechem. Now it's time for you to turn over your beds. So they said, you're late to the party. We already heard from Rabbi Eliezer. Amar lo kfar kafinu al pi hazaken. We already turned it over based on the zaken, based on Rabbi Eliezer. So that's a machlokes in regards to the Tanoim as to when the minhagim of Avelus actually kick in. Halacha l'maisa, I believe it is with stimas hagolel. So normally the way that it works is that before someone comes home from the burial, someone's working on the mirrors and someone's working on all the minhagim that apply in the house. Again, we don't do kfiyas mita anyways nowadays, but for all whatever minhagim do apply, they apply at that point. The nafkamina is whether or not you're an onaim throughout that time. When did the minhagi Avelus kick in? So that's some of this discussion. Tanu Rabbanon, 8 lines down, Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Me'ema Saizok v'nesem mitos be'erev Shabbos. We know, of course, that one is not allowed to have a public display of Avelus on Shabbos. If that's true, we have to turn the beds right side up. So how do we do that? When do we do that, I should say? So it says the Gemara, Mina mincha ulamala. From the time we reach the Zman when one can daven mincha, which is 30 minutes past chatzos, then one is allowed to turn their beds back over. However, Amar Rabba Bar Huna, Afal Pikein, even though this is the appropriate time to turn the beds back upright because it's Shabbos. However, one is not allowed to sit on those beds that are currently turned upright because it's still Avelus during the day. It has to first become dark, and then and only then is one allowed to sit on those beds. Well, the Motzei Shabbos, and on Saturday night, and in this case, we are assuming Shiva is over Sunday morning. Even though he only has 1 day left of the Shiva that he's sitting, one is obligated to turn over all the beds yet again. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis teach us in the Brisa, last short line, last of the middle width lines. One is not only obligated to turn over their bed, however, I should say, Ella, rather, what should they do? Ella kol mitos sheyesh lo besoch beso hu kofeh. You have 10 beds in 10 different rooms, which in their days was equivalent to a mansion. Many of us have close to that many mattresses in our house. We have about that many mattresses in our house. Kofes kula. So we have a guest bedroom that our guests use. Right now, one of my kids is sleeping there. We're like adding some, doing a little painting in his room. Fine. He's sleeping down there. It's a bed that we use. All of the mattresses have to turn over kofes kula. It's not only true in one house. It's true that if there are 5 brothers who live in 5 different houses and one of them died, kulan kofin, all the beds in all the houses, let's call it 50 mattresses, an approximation, all of them have to be turned over. However, third line into the middle width lines, let's say you have that bed. The bed is never used for people. It's always used for mail and packages and clothing. And fine, if it's never, ever, ever, ever used for that, or it's only used for kalim, it's only used for storage, then there's no need to turn that bed over. It's only a bed that at the very least is used sparingly, then that bed needs to be turned over. Dargash is a type of bed. We don't yet know what it is, but it's a type of bed. You don't have to flip it over. You're allowed to stand it up vertically on its 2 legs so that it's not used at all. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, nope, Dargash matir is karbita, v'hu nofel me'ela. We can untie that which is holding up the mattress, and then the mattress will fall from the frame. That's talking about this Dargash, and again, we still don't know what it is. So the Gemara asks, my Dargash, what is this Dargash? What kind of bed is it? Amar Ula, and this is a big machlokes in the Tanoim, Amar Ula, in the Rishonim, he says, Arsa de Gada. An Arsa is a bed in Aramaic, and de Gada is a bed that's used for mazel. Take a look at Rashi, or his equivalent, 3 lines down. Dibur HaMaschil, Arsa de Gada. Mita, Shem Yachad Imosa, Le Mazel Tov. It's a bed that's saved for good wishes. Nobody uses it. Asks the Rishonim, the Ran says that's Darkei Amori Mamish. That's like not, that's 10 problems with this. There's so many things wrong with it. So they give different answers. They give different ukimtas. You can see some answers in the bottom here. It's not so simple as to what this bed is. It's saying it's just for mazel. Is it just some of the Rishonim, right? I think the Shita Mekubetzes, right? So I can't remember where I saw it, but somebody writes that it's showing your ashirus, that you have an extra mattress that nobody sleeps on. So a person can keep it as a kar satov to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that's more mistaber. That's more logical to assume that that's correct in the face of the assumption that it might be Darkei and Mori. It's a very difficult thing to understand in the Gemara, how we could even have such a havamina, but that's what the Gemara says, that it's possible that this arsa de gada, that this dargash is a bed that's for mazel and or a bed that shows one's ashirus. We'll question this and we'll change our understanding of this momentarily, but this is the starting point of what we think a dargash is, a bed for mazel. Amar le Rabba, if this is true, then Gabe Melech, we have a Mishnah that speaks about a dargash. And what does it say? Okay, we say about a king that under certain circumstances, he can lean up against and lean on a dargash. He can use this kind of bed. How can it be? The whole point of the Arsa de Gad is that it was never used. So what do you mean? Now you're using it? Why now are you using it? The Gemara says, that's not a good question. Ravashi, my kusha, what kind of question are you asking against this understanding of dargash? It's no different than midi dehavi achilu shasia. Normally, other people don't feed you, and only during avelus. Dad ha'idna lo ochline below ashkine. Other people don't feed you. Hashta ochline v'ashkine. Things change. You're in avelus. So therefore, there are times that the bed is going to be used. So the Gemara says that's not a good argument, but I would change your question. Ela ikasha hakasha. If you're going to ask a question about a dargash, I would ask the following. This should be the Tanya. We're a little bit more than a third of the way down, almost halfway down. Dargash eino tzarech lechaposo ela zokva. We had said that a dargash doesn't have to be flipped over, but it could be stood up. It could be stood up vertically. But if it's going to be an arsa de gada, if it's going to be a bed of any kind, you should have to flip it over and not stand it up. Why? Because hatanya hakofe mitaso lo mitaso bilvad hu kofe elakom mitos yesh lo besoch beso kofe. We don't see an exclusion in the brisa for an arsa de gada. So how can you say that it's supposed to be stood up and not turned over? So says the Gemara, Umay kusha. That's not a good question either. Midi dehave amitam yuchedes lekelim. This should be similar to a mita that's miyuchedes for kelim, a bed that's exclusively used for storage. In that case, we said that the mita is not zakufa and it's not kafufa. We don't stand it up. We don't turn it over. The Tanya im haisa mita miyuchedes lekelim eino tzarech lechaposa. So that's not a good argument either. You can't say that you really have a question about whether or not the bed should be stood up or flipped over. That's not a good question. But the Gemara does acquiesce that there still is a question to be asked. Really, if you're going to ask a question, it should be like this. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Dargash Matir Karbita that a dargash is that we said that we can loosen whatever's holding up the mattress and the mattress will fall on its own. And if you're saying that we're talking about this bed that nobody ever sleeps on, well, it's not built like a regular bed. This is kind of the way I'm envisioning it is more like a couch or a chase of some kind. It's not a regular bed. It's not made the same way. My karbitin isla, it doesn't have the regular straps. We spoke about this already. The straps that go under the bed. So they had a bed frame and they would weave straps across the frame left to right. And according to some, also the length of the bed. And the mattress would sit on that like a weave. Shasi v'arev was some of the shitas that we saw in the Gemara earlier. So the Gemara says, if you have a kasha, your kasha should be, how can it be that there are any karbitin, that there are any straps that are holding up the bed? This is not a regular bed. It's a bed that you purchased only to show your wealth. So says the Gemara halfway down, Ki asa Rabban Amar Le Ahume Rabban, and there was a Rav who paskened on really what is this dargash and what was his name. Rav Tachlifa Bar Ma'arava Shemei. Davashliach Beshuka de Gildai. He was in the marketplace that sold pieces of material. My dargash, what is dargash? Oh, put my question mark in the wrong place there. It's arsa de tzila. It's a bed that's made out of leather. So again, it's probably something similar to our types of couches that are a little bit nicer and they're made to be more comfortable, but it's really a sign of wealth. I remember one of my friends, his parents had a living room that no one was allowed to sit in when I was growing up. And I never understood that. We tried to jump on our couches. Mrs. Karesh didn't like that very much, but this family, you couldn't even enter the room. It was literally just for show. The whole room, there were multiple, I remember what it looks like, multiple couches and fancy vases and nothing. The whole thing was this. It looked chashuv. The whole thing looked chashuv, and that was it. Nobody else would ever use it. So that's what the Gemara now assumes, that instead of saying that this dargash is a bed for mazel, that this dargash is actually a bed that's made out of a really nice material to show chashivas. Itmar nami. We have the Amoraim speak about this also. Amar of Yirmiyah dargash seirugo mitocho mita seirugo al gaba. That a dargash, the way that it's built, is that that which is holding it up, the leather straps that are holding it up, are not underneath and supporting the mattress. They are within the mattress. So let's just assume for a moment that this is the mattress. So if you have a dargash, so then the dargash would have it that the leather straps are in the middle width of the mattress, and then they connect to, they tie around the bed frame. However, if we were talking about the other types of beds have the leather straps underneath, they're coming out of the bottom, and then you rest the mattress on top of them. So that's the nafkamina as to how these beds are made, the difference between a regular bed where the straps are underneath and this dargash, this arsa datzila, where the straps are within. Amar Rav Yaakov bar Acha, Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi, halacha k'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We paskin like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was of the opinion, he says that matir karbita b'hunofel me'elav, that we are allowed to just undo the leather straps and the bed would fall on its own. Itmar nami, and machlokas if the words belong there. Amar Rav Yaakov bar Acha, Amar Rav Asi, mita she nalkiteha yotzen zokvo v'dayo. If you have a bed where there are poles that come out of the mattress, and that's how the mattress stays on top of its frame, then zokvo v'dayo, we just stand up the mattress, and that's considered appropriate. Sorry for the cough. Tanu Rabban, the rabbis have taught us Yashan al gabe kise al gabe udaini gedola. If a person is resting on a chair or on top of a very large, the grinding machines that they had, some type of a mortar and pestles type of system, or al gabe karka, you're not yotze. Very strange language. You're not yotze. What? It doesn't mean you're not yotze, you're yotze avelus, but you didn't fulfill the minhag properly. It's a bit of a unique language to pass over its point. Rav Yochanan, why? Shalokim kfiyas hamita, because you didn't fulfill your avelus spitz like the right way. You really should have done it with kfiyas hamita, and you didn't do that. You were on a chair, you were lying on top of this large grinding machine, or you were on the ground. That's not right. You should be on a mattress, but an overturned mattress. Tanu Rabbanim, when a person's in avelus, you're allowed to sweep and you're allowed to be marbitz. We've had this word many times in Shas. They'd sprinkle water to keep the dust down. And that is perfectly fine. And as well, you can wash dishes and bowls and cups and plates and water containers in a beis avel. However, you're not allowed to bring nice smelling things that are lit with fire, incense. That's not allowed in beis avel. Says the Gemara, is that true? We said that in a beis avel, you're not allowed to make a bracha on the mugmar. If the incense is made from something that's made from the ground, so then the halacha is you'd have to make a bracha. Depends on how it's made. I recently stayed in a hotel and they had these little things for incense. You could just light the end of it, and I should have asked. I didn't think about it till right now, but that's a shaila. What's it made out of? Is it natural stuff? In which case you probably have to make a bracha one way or the other. No way, like no different than Motzei Shabbos when we say Borim and Evasamim. I'm doing a bris in a Sephardic shul tomorrow. So I said to the family, if you want to know how to do a Sephardic bris, you got to talk to the rabbi of the shul, because I don't know anything. All I can tell you is that they bring leaves and make a bracha in the middle.
Sure, gonna be hadassah.
So they said to me, we want an Ashkenazi bris. I'm like, okay, just communicate it to the rabbi, because I'm telling you right now that it's a whole different ballgame. Different brachos, shechianu. However, the Ashkenazim don't make it. Some Sephardim make a shechianu, which is not minhag Ashkenazim in Chutz La'aretz. It's only minhag Eretz Yisrael. I did a bris many years ago, 8-9 years ago in Kins, and the father of the baby, the grandfather of the baby, went over to Rabbi Matenki and said, I want to make a shechianu. I hold of minhag Eretz Yisrael. He's like, no, you don't. You're an Ashkenaz Jew in America. There is no minhag Eretz Yisrael for an Ashkenaz Jew in America to make a shechianu. There's no, can I do a harama? I'll buy. He's like, you're making it on the garment. It's not, there's a lo kashur. That's not our minhag. It's not allowed. So in all the secular places, they make a shechianu, like in the conservative and reform movements, they make a shechianu. But there, it's not just the parents. That's the whole ganze room. Everybody makes a bracha shechianu. Is it a bracha levatala? That's a good shaila, but certainly not mutter. I don't say amen under the circumstances. I just, kind of deadpan. I don't react. It's a problem. But in a Sephardic shul where it really is the minhag, then of course it's appropriate to say amen to those brachos. But when a person's making a bracha levatala or a bracha she'ein tzricha, anything in that frame of mind, and you are a frum Jew, you should not be saying amen. These are all the shailas of going into reform shuls for your first cousin's bas mitzvah. All these kinds of shalas are very complicated, and you don't want to give too much credence. And maybe by showing up, you're already giving credence, and you shouldn't go. These are shalas discussed in the poskim. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. So the Gemara says that how can you say that you're not allowed to bring mugmar in? What does the Bar Kapara say? He says, "Ein mevorchen ala mugmar v'lo al b'samim b'beis avel." What's the diuk from the statement of Bar Kapara? Baruchehu d'lo mevorchinon. You don't make a bracha, but ha'asuye ma'isinan. But you are allowed to bring it in. So that's a stira. Answers the Gemara. Lo kasha ha b'beis avel. One is in a place where the avelim are, and the other is in a place ha b'beis hamenachem, where the people who are doing nichum avelim, that's where they're sitting. So in the beis avel, it's not allowed. In the beis hamenachem, where people are giving nichum avelim, then it's permissible. The Gemara for certainly the next 30 lines or so, is going to speak about customs that used to take place with the wealthy, and that because it reflected poorly on the aniyim and other similar types of cases, takanas were put into place to ensure that nobody's feelings were hurt. Let's start with the Mishnah, 15 lines, 12 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. In Molichin the Beis Avel lo b'tabla lo b'askutla lo b'kinun ela b'salim. One should not go to the Beis Avel with all of these fancy types of trays. A tablet is a tray, an askutla is a special dish, a kinon is a very special shaped dish, ela b'salim, regular baskets. Ve'ein omen birchas avelim b'moed. We do not say the special birchas avelim. It ends baruch menachem avelim. It's not a regular bracha that we say nowadays. Aval, even though we don't make that bracha during Chol HaMoed, omdim b'shur menachamen, that we do go into a shura and we give nichum avelim in the shura, and then from there upotron as harabim. From there, everyone can go home. It's Chol HaMoed, so everyone can be sent home. Take a look at Rashi's equivalent, 5 lines from the bottom of Rashi's inner margin. Dibra maskol potron es harabim she'omrim lemenachem and l'chul b'techem. Everybody go home. You were here. Thank you for being here. Everyone can go home. The Mishnah concludes 2 lines before the end of the Mishnah. In manichin es hamita b'rachov. We don't do a public wake. We don't leave the mita out in the street. Shelo lahargil es hesped, because it's moed after all. It's chol hamoed. We don't want people to be marved behesped, so we don't leave the mace out. V'lo shal nashim la'olam. Even not forget about chol hamoed. Even during the year, we would not present a woman on her mita after she's passed away, because mipnei akov. Tanu Rabbanan. Let's get into the contrasts between the way that the Ashirim used to behave and the Anim. Birishona, initially, they'd bring things to the Beis Havel. Ashirim, they'd bring b'kiltos shel kesef v'shel zahav, with dishes that were made out of silver and gold. V'aniyim, the poor people, they didn't have those kinds of dishes. B'salei nitzarim shel arava klufa. Then they would make some type of wicker basket, and that's all they had. V'hayu mispaishim. And because the wealthy were able to do something that was really chashuv, and the poor people had a sharp contrast, they could only afford these cheap wicker baskets. So therefore, hiskinu sheyuhu hakol mevin b'salei nitzarim shel arava klufa v'ivnei kvodon shelanim. Very sensitive. Uklal gadol, you cannot bring something overly fancy to the Shiva house. It's not nice, because the poor people cannot keep up with the Joneses, and it's not a right standard. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught 5 lines from the bottom, Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Barishono, hayu mashkin bebeis havel. In regards to drinks in the Beis Havel, people would bring drinks. Ashirim b'schuchis lavana. The wealthy would bring white glass, which apparently was a rare commodity and very expensive back in the day. They'd bring things in glass jars, but they'd bring cheap glass, and it was always colorful glass, but not the white one. But they'd show up, they'd come up with your colorful glass, and as you're doing that, someone's bringing in a 12-pack of these gorgeous white bottles. It's not right. And we change things because of the kavod of poor people. Initially, when people would die, they would leave the faces of the wealthy revealed, and they'd cover the faces of the poor. People who are really poor, they're eating pas b'melach tochel, they don't have a lot of food, so their face would blacken very quickly after they would die. Even when they were alive, their face would have a certain darkness to it. And the poor people who were still alive were like, this is not right. You can't just have an open casket for the rich and not for the poor. It's not nice. And therefore, so that's what the Gemara says, is that because of kvodan shalanim, we're not allowed to do a wake. Just an interesting sugya in Shas. I'm saying
seems like once upon a time.
Oh yeah, it certainly was mutter. It certainly is mutter. There's nothing wrong with being megala panim of there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, okay, there are halachos for chevra kadishit, close their eyes and whatever. There's like minhagim that we do with the guf after a person passes away, but there's certainly seemingly nothing wrong with a wake. And today, even our aniyim have cell phones sometimes, and it's a different world. Like the level of aniyim, back in the day was a whole different ballgame. Another one, the Rishona, Hayumotzi and Ashirim B'dargash, they would present the body, the mace, on a fancy leather bed. The dargash is a reference to what we saw earlier. However, it says the Gemara in the very last word of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, Ve'anim B'klicha. They were on a regular bed. Rashi, Klicha, Mita Shel Mesim, a regular bed. It wasn't anything fancy. So that also is not right. V'hayu Ispaishim, the people who are poor said, this is pasnish, it's not nice. We don't have anything, and you're going to give this guy a nice, beautiful leather bed. It's not right. So to be sensitive to those who are poor, we changed things around, and we ensured that everyone would be brought out on a regular mita shel mesim on the klicha. If a person died because of some intestinal issues and it didn't have a good odor, so they would do mugmar, but that was only tachas chol me'ayim mesim. However, the people who were alive with those issues were like, that's what people think of us. Like, we need mugmar, we need incense to just be around us. Hiskinu shayu menichen tachas hakol mipnei kvodan shel cholim me'ayim chayim. So we wanted to be sensitive to those who had these types of medical issues, and therefore every mace got the mugmar. They all got the incense. 6 lines down. If a woman died when she was a nida, they would wash all of her clothing. However, but women who were nidos, they were embarrassed because I'm tameh. Like, you got to go send everything that I have to the laundromat. It's not nice. So therefore, we added a sensitivity that we would wash all of the kelim of women in order to show some respect to the nidos chayos, that women who were alive and who were in need in their clothes were tmeis. Birishona, madbilan al gabe zav and mesim. Then the initial custom was that if a zav passed away, they'd wash all of his clothing and make sure that they were tahor. But the people who were alive in zavin, they were embarrassed. So therefore, last short line, we added a level of sensitivity that everyone's clothes were washed, even non-zavim, everybody. What percentage of people were zavim? It's a tiny percentage, doesn't matter. For the sensitivity of others, we have to go the extra mile.
About the embarrassment of the zav in the first place.
What?
Why weren't they?
It's a halachic consideration that the clothes are tameh. They're not saying don't wash the clothes. We have to wash the clothes because otherwise no one can benefit from them. No one can use them. They're yorshim, that they're tameh. If he's in need, if he's a zav, or if she's in nida, those clothes are tameh until otherwise noted. So we didn't have a choice. We had to do it. But in order to get it done in a way without being levayish anyone, so therefore all women and all men had to have all of their clothes laundered when they died. It was a way to circumvent the halachic issues of the clothing being tameh without embarrassing anyone. Anyone who died, we just washed all their clothes. It doesn't apply nowadays, of course. But I mean, we're not makbid on these things. There's no Beis Hamikdash, but please God, soon we should be concerned about them. So on the first long line, the Gemara says, "B'rishono haisa hotzas hameis kasha the krov of yoser mimisaso." So expensive to bury people. Tachrichan became very expensive, like everything else. We scale up and we try to make it better. And the kitta looks like that, and there's this kind of fabric. It got so expensive. Ashu krova manichanoso vorchen. They would used to leave the mace without any tachrichan, and then they'd run away in embarrassment. It's not right. So therefore, the Gemara says, "At Shabbat Rabban Gamliel, the Noha Kalus Rosh Ba'atzmo B'Yatsa B'Kli Pishtan." Rabbi Gamliel made a tzava for himself that in his will he said, "Bury me in simple linens. Let other people see from me that I'm a great rabbi." This is real leadership. He's going to lower himself so that everyone will understand that this is not what's important. And from that time on, he solved a big problem. This is discussion here. If this is talking about his death, it's Tosfos on the side here. The second Tosfos, third of the way down. V'nag kalos rosh ba'atzmo. Shetziva came to shas petira. So that was the first option as I presented it. It was in his tzava. V'yesh meforshen le'echad mibnei beiso b'chayav. He was talking about someone in his family and not him. V'lashon ba'atzmo, says Tosfos, mashma kipirish rishon. The language of the Gemara is more mukhrach, like the first approach, which is that it was part of his tzava, because it says be'atzmo and it doesn't say b'mishpachto, b'bno. It only says that it's talking about him. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says a quarter of the way down, almost a third of the way down. Even for tzarda, which is the cost of bar zuzah. What's tzarda? So tzarda, if you look in Rashi, he says kanabus. It's hemp. It's a garment that's made out of herbs. That's how some of the Rishonim explain this. And obviously, I would imagine that's where the word canvas came from. They're very, very, very similar. I don't know. Is canvas natural? I have no idea.
That's what I says, canvas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does he say that it's hemp also?
No, no.
I don't know what canvas is really made of.
Doesn't somebody in the show, Ben Porat, doesn't he own a company like that?
Burlap.
Huh? Burlap?
Burlap, yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Okay, fine. I'm just
Like potato sacks.
potato sacks.
But
Is that natural?
That I think is natural.
Burlap is
burlap,
natural.
I think, is natural, yeah, but I don't know
It's
about
just so hard to say that the word cannabis didn't come from cannabis. Because they had this language back then already, and canvas is if it's a modern invention, then it can't be synthetic. If that's what but anyways, that's what it says here on the bottom. It's cannabis. That's how Rashi explains. Okay, says the Gemara at the 2 dots, a third of the way down. that one is not allowed to leave the bed outside. There is no restrictions for a Moed, for a Talmid Chacham on the Moed. All the more so with Chanukah and Purim, which is less chamor. So if a Talmid Chacham dies on the Moed, we give a regular eulogy, and all the more so by Chanukah and Purim, which have no restrictions on them. I mean, it really is Asr Behesped, but it's really only Asr Behesped for a regular person. This is only true in his presence. However, if we're not in the presence of the Chacham, so then we don't speak glowingly about him. There are no Hespedim. Says the Gemara, that's not true that Shelo B'fanav, that we don't speak about him on Chol HaMoed. How could you say that? He was standing at a place where there was no mace. It was B'pum Nara at the opening of the river, and it was during Chol HaMoed. There was no mace there, and he did give a eulogy. So says the Gemara, that's a great question. And the Gemara kind of gives an ukimta Amarav Papi Yom Shmua Hava Uchid B'fanav Dami. It was the day that they heard that he had died. And that day, therefore, was Kibifanav Dami. It wasn't a regular hesped, it was mamish the day he died, and they were broken over it. But otherwise, it is in fact the case that Shelo B'fanav, we should not be maspid a gadol if he's not present. So let's say a person died on the first day of Chol HaMoed, a gadol had a chacham died on the first day of Chol HaMoed, doesn't get buried till day 3. So you can only be maspid in front of him. Otherwise, you have to treat him like a regular person, even though he's not a regular person, but Shelo B'fanav, then we have to allow the halachos of Chol HaMoed to kick in to maintain that level of simcha. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down, Amar Ula, Hesped al Lev. The word hesped is talking about on your heart. Dichsiv al shadayim softim, that on your chest you will beat. So hesped is from the word beating a chest. Tipuach biyad. The language of hitting is with tipuach, and kilus is beregel. Stamping your feet is the word kilus. And Tana Rabbana, when it comes to stamping your feet out of sadness, hamekales lo yikales besandal el b'min al mibnei hasakana. One should not use a sandal. One should not use a thin sandal, but they should be wearing regular shoes so that they don't hurt themselves. Amar Rav Yochanan, talk about social cues. Avel, kevan sheni anu rosho. Once the Avel gives a nod, recognizing that you've successfully been menachem him, shuvein menachem reshoy leishev etzlo. No more. Walk out of the house. On one of the nights of Shiva, when my brother died, we were all sitting around. It was 10:30 at night. Someone showed up after the 10 o'clock slot. I was occupied. I was in the bathroom, and I come out, and like the house is like eerily silent. There was a whole bunch of us there. So I walked into the room, and one woman was standing there, and she was makbid gomer to say amakum minachem to everyone at the same time. I was out in the bathroom for like 5 minutes. So it's not right. I mean, I didn't care personally. I'm just saying that's not appropriate. You're not allowed to be matriach. The tzibur, just say amakum minachem for whoever's in the room and go home. So she totally missed the cues. Nobody knew who she was. It was a beautiful gesture. That was very kind of her that she showed up, but it wasn't the right way to do it. When you get the nod from the Avel, pack out. When they get up and walk out, you get up and walk out. They're going to take a rest, you get out. That's not a space for us anymore. We should leave at that point. Shuvein menachmen rishoyin leishevet. So then it's not right to stay anymore. If a nasi walks in the room, so then everyone's obligated, of course, to stand up, with the exceptions of chutz me'avel v'chola. A person who's in avelus is not obligated to stand up, and a person who's sick is also not obligated. If in fact they did stand up, lakol omrim lahem shivu, the nasi has to say to them shivu in order for them to sit down. You can't sit down until he says shivu. Reminiscent lahavdil mamish of the courts of law, you may be seated, right? So something similar, shivu. Wonder if they got it from here. Could be. Who knows? Chutz me'avel v'chola, that he would not say shavu to the chola. So some of the Rishonim say that he says something else to them in its place, that Kadosh Baruch Hu should bench you, kind of a thing, but he doesn't say shavu.
So if your Rav comes in while you're sitting Shiva,
it says a nasi, not a chacham. A nasi, we don't happen to see him nowadays. But it doesn't say that. It's only talking about a nasi, and we've learned distinctions already between a nasi and a chacham. We learned that a couple of blot ago. So no, it's not the same thing. And I don't know what the halacha is if the Rav walks in. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Okay, so says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Avel Yom Rishon Asr Lechol Lechem Mishalo. On the first day of Avelus, an Avel is not allowed to eat his own food. How do we know this? It's a diuk from a pasuk. You're not supposed to eat other people's food. So that's where we learn this from. Rabbi Rav Yosef, they would trade meals with one another when one person was in Avelus, the other one would cook all the meals. If there's a person who died in a particular city, no one is allowed to do malacha until that person is buried. Rav Hamnuna, he went to a particular place called Drumta. When I first looked at this Gemara, I thought it was it just meant somewhere in the south, and maybe it was, but a lot of the Meforshim explained this to be a place. Shama kol shipur the shichva. They heard the sound of a shofar that someone in the community had died. And these are such communal differences. Like that's how they announced that somebody died. They blew a shofar. You knew it came from the direction of the funeral home. Everybody knew that somebody died. So Rav Hamnuna saw that there were some people in town who didn't put down their tools and they were still working. So Amar Lahu, we learned about Shamta. We learned about putting people into Chem. So he put them into Chera. So Lo Shachva, Ikab B'mata. Isn't there a dead person in your city? How dare you work? You're in Shamta. You've been excommunicated. Amrulay, they said to him, don't worry, Chavurta Ikab B'mata. We have a Chevra Kadisha. We have people who take care of these things. And therefore, Amar Lahu, therefore Rav Hamnuna says back to them, Ihachi Sharu Lahu, it's permissible for you. Some of the Rishonim learn this as Shari Lahu, I now permit you to no longer be Bishamta. Because this is some of the language that we saw, is that if a person is Bishamta, he has to be taken out of Shamta. So Rav Hamnuna put them into Shamta incorrectly. And he was Shari Lahu, he then took them out of Shamta. That's what this language of Shari means, according to some. What?
What's today's Hebrew day?
Sayonara.
What's the Chevra Kadisha day, so to speak?
Is it?
But what day does the Chevra Kadisha?
I didn't even know that.
Do they not? If so,
Yeah, they always.
because they're taking the place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was called the Moshe and Zion Adar. It's always their day. It's a leap year, so it's not really Zion Adar.
Okay. It's according to Chazal, it's a Zion Adar. Yeah.
Still pretty good.
That's pretty good. I did not know that. Rav Yehuda Amar Rab, Kol Hamiskash Al Mesa Yosem died. This is a terrible story. Anyone who has too much emotions when somebody dies, Al Mes Acher Hu Bocha, he'll end up mourning over another person. And the Gemara tells you a bitterly sad story. There was a woman, Dahavas B'Shivavuse de Rav Huna. There was a woman who lived in the neighborhood of Rav Huna. Havula Shiva Bane. She had 7 sons. Nebach Meis Chad Minai, one of them died. Havas Kabachi B'Yiserta Ale. She was crying too much on them. We'll see what too much means in a little bit. It's very hard to put a measure on emotions, but the Torah does demand that of us. On Rosh Hashanah, we're supposed to feel elevated. On Yom Kippur, we're supposed to be scared. We have a lot of expectations of our feelings, and it's actually true here as well. So it says the Gemara, Shalach le Rav Huna. Rav Huna wanted to protect her from damage, so he reached out to her and said, Lo sa'avdi hachi, you got to stop. You can't do this. It's not good for you. Says the Gemara, Lo ashke chabe. She did not listen to him and she couldn't control her emotions. Shalach la, he wrote back to her, Itzaisas mutav. If you listen to me, you'll be fine. But if you don't, then savis zvadatal idach, then you're going to need to prepare more tachrichin for more of your children. And then Nebuch, it happened, umisukulu, all of them ended up passing away. Lesof amar la timush zvadatal lenafshech. Now you're going to have to prepare for yourself. You're crying too much. Again, it's not a judgment. It's a very hard sentence to say when someone's in pain. And Taka Umisa, and she died. Just an awful story. And we'll see what it means in the next line. What is considered crying too much? Al tivku lemeis ve'al tanudu lo. What does this pasuk mean? Al tivku lemeis yoser midai. That's the drasha. Ve'al tanudu lemeis yoser mikashir. So how do we understand this? Shlosha yomim lebechi. 3 days is for intensive crying. V'shiva lehesped. The next 4 days up to 7 is for hespedim. V'shloshim legihuts uletisporas. And day 30 is the line in the sand for gihuts, for ironing one's clothes, and for tisporas, for getting a haircut. From that day on, Hashem says, "Iatem rachmanim bo yoser mimeni." None of you could possibly have as much rachmanis as I do. There's a big rate on this in the Masifta. Go read there. There's 5, 6, 7 shitas on what this actually means. According to some of the Rishonim I saw here, I think it's the Rambam, is that because this is the derech of the world, it's something that we need to learn to adjust to. This is a temporary world. It's not the permanent world. Again, it's a hashkafa above our level. It's a one to pine for, but that is what the Gemara says. What does the next pasuk mean? Bacho, bacha, leholech. So it says the Gemara, Amar of Yehuda, leholech belobanim. Then when is one allowed to cry so much more than normal? That's if someone passes away belobanim. That is what the Gemara says, that they pass away with no children. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lo azal be'evla. In fact, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi would never go to a beis avel, ela leman de azil below bani. Only in a case where one did not have children and died. Tichsi bacho bachu laholech kilo yashuv od urei es eretz moladto, because they would not have the generations to follow. Rav Huna Amar zesha avar aver b'shana ba. This is referring to one who has an avera, and they keep repeating the averas. And the Gemara has a famous drasha here, Rav Huna l'taime. The Amar Rav Huna kevan she'avar adam avera b'shanaba hutralo. So says the Gemara, when a person does an avera, it's as if it's mutter to them. Hutralo salka daitach. Would you say that it's actually mutter? Elaima na says lo keheter. Is that when a person does an avera so many times, after a while it becomes heter. To repair those types of averas, that's very difficult. Many of us, this is our psychology, many of us struggle in the same area for many years at a time. And it's very difficult to crawl out of it because the more one fails in one area, it's harder to step out. We're going to stop right here, 4 lines from the bottom. Here's Hashem tomorrow. We'll finish the Masechta together, and then we'll start the next night on Thursday with Daf Beis of Chagiga, a siyum on Monday night. Please let me know if you plan on joining the siyum. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful night.
I don't